Hello and welcome to the Just-in-Time Cafe's webinar. I'm Elizabeth Swan, co-founder of the Just-in-Time Cafe. I'll be your moderator today, and today's webinar is titled How to Use Task Boards to Build Better Leader Behaviors. Better be leader. And today's host is Tracy O'Rourke. Let me tell you a little bit about Tracy. I've known her for over 17 years. Which means we're both over 17. And we've both been in process improvement space for a long, long time. We are both co-founders of the Just-in-Time Cafe. We are co-hosts of the Just-in-Time Cafe podcast. We co-wrote the Problem Solvers Toolkit. Tracy's an instructor at UC San Diego for the Greenbelt and for our most recent course, the Lean Six Sigma Leadership course. She's also chair of the SoCal Lean Network. She's a member of AME's West Region Board, that is the Association for Manufacturing Excellence. Welcome, Tracy.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. And we have done a lot of co-ing, and I am still happy to co with you on many things.
I gotta say, I think we're lucky. So before we get to Tracy, a few housekeeping notes. You can ask questions anytime by putting them into the chat area. There's also a question area, but we'll definitely be using the chat throughout the webinar. If I happen to catch a question, I'll grab it, but we are watching the chat. Also, please, when you put anything in the chat area, address it to panelists and attendees. It's great for everyone to see your questions. Often people, other participants will answer the questions or just want to join in the conversation. So I might put some reminders out there occasionally to say, address everybody, and welcome, Jennifer. I just saw you. Videos of our webinars are available for free. We post them all on the Just-in-Time Cafe website. That's at jitcafe.com under webinars, and those usually go out the Monday after the Thursday webinar, and we will email all of you when it's ready. So you'll get news about that. And you can always check the webinar page to see what the latest webinars are. So join us for our first activity by sharing where you are from. You guys are generally registered from all over the world, so we'd love to know where you are at the moment, because then it'll tell us how late you're staying up, or maybe how early you got up.
And what you're drinking.
Yeah, Tracy, do you want them to tell you? We'll find out.
Might as well, drinking something.
Depends on where they are. We've got Kathy Madden, or Kathy in Bristol. Welcome. We've got Joel in Colorado Springs. We've got Jennifer attending, I think you're in Michigan, Ann Arbor, as I recall. Joy, welcome, Joy. So lovely to have you. Jennifer, lovely to have you. And in Joy's in Indianapolis, thank you. Shane in Lincoln, Nebraska. And Rebecca's in Portland, Oregon. Heather's in San Diego, Sharon's in Seattle, Nicholas is in Sacramento. David's from Brisbane. Thank you, David. You just turned us into an international webinar. We just upped our cred by Australian standards. 4 a.m. I am impressed. Very nice. Ottawa, Canada, Ken. Thank you again. Our neighbor in the north. And Joy, drinking matcha tea, green matcha tea. Nothing hard. It's not that late over there. Drinking water or just drinking water. That's Christina or Christine in Denver. And Giselle in Abu Dhabi, welcome. And Kelly from Tokyo, again, lovely, our Far East participant, lovely. And Gemma in the UK, Gemma made it, awesome. Okay, that is a great load of wonderful people. Looking forward to the conversation, and over to you, Tracy.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. We actually I haven't done a webinar besides hosting. I haven't actually done one in January, so I'm really happy to do this. I'm very excited. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, because the challenge has always been leader behaviors and how do we do a better job supporting leaders and being clear about what we're tasked to do. So before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the Just-in-Time Cafe, of course, and that is a place that we have created, Elizabeth and I in order to cultivate a hub where problem solvers can connect, share, and grow. We provide free webinars, videos, podcasts. We highlight people like lean authors, practitioners, and leaders, people like Jeffrey Liker, Mark Rabin. We also highlight organizations like the nonprofit San Diego Humane Society and also UCSD's Health. We really believe we have 3 core values that drive everything we do. We cultivate community. We want to provide an inclusive and positive space where people around the world can learn and grow. We believe in a trailblazing spirit, having the courage to challenge and inspire each other to create constant state of awesomeness. A big part of that is a lot of our examples sometimes get updated because of the new things we're exposed to. And so we really like making things even better than they were. And then ultimately, we do believe in a rising tide. We want to lift each other up. We want to lift other people in the community up. We believe that if we have a global problem-solving community, it's just good for the planet. So now let's get to what we're going to be talking about today. And ultimately, like I said, we're trying to build better leader behaviors, and we're going to focus on how task boards, or what we call Kamishibai boards, can help do that. So here are some of our objectives. You're going to learn about what the heck is Kamishibai. It almost sounds like a cuss word, but it is not. It's a Japanese word. You'll know how to use them. You'll know enough about them when these tools might be a good place to use them. You say, hey, we should probably try a task board or Kamishibai board. I'm going to show you how organizations have used these cards to implement leader standard work. And I'm going to briefly discuss how to maximize these even in a virtual environment. So yes, you can flip these cards in person. You can still use them in a virtual environment. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that might work virtually, because everybody is still virtually, although I'm getting a sense that we're going back to physical. I myself am actually on site already with people. So here's our agenda, and we've got about an hour. So let's get to it. So first of all, I have a question for you. When you think about your future, lean culture, your visionary future state, what are leaders in the organization doing? What are they saying? What are employees saying about them? I'd love to hear your comments about that in the chat window. So just go ahead and type in the chat window. If you were almost at perfection, because I know we're always in the pursuit of perfection, what are leaders doing? What are they saying to their staff? What are employees saying about them? And what would employees say about the culture? So tell us a little bit about some of that. And as you guys are hearing about that or talking about that, suggesting that, I'm going to just speak a little bit more. I think the challenge is, everybody says they want to do this, right? They want to do lean. And sometimes they're not clear on what they're supposed to do. And sometimes when we are clear, they don't want to do that. Right? So they're like, I don't know do I really have to do that? I have to change that much. And sometimes it's a surprise for people. So, that's a challenge. And, there's definitely a balance between acceptance, readiness, and really doing the right things to transform our culture. So if people really are committed, what does that look like? What we can do is provide clarity and provide a path for them to grow those skills. And so sometimes we don't do such a great job making it really clear what it is that we're looking to have them do, leaders do in particular. So let's see, what did some people say, Elizabeth?
Catherine's saying we see them empowering their direct reports and supporting them in continuous improvement activities. And Gina's saying we see them asking questions and listening to our team members' ideas. Jennifer said they are visible. They demonstrate how much they care. Katie said, leader is asking, what have you improved today? What can we make better tomorrow? I like that. Daniel said, providing direction to their communities. Angela offered clear communication on end goals. And Gemma offered the question, so what did we learn?
Mm-hmm.
Giselle said an ideal state is where everyone will be asking, how can we improve the process, less focus on the person, more on the systems. Jeff offered, why is it done that way? Robinson offered, they say what you want to hear, but actions do not align. Wait a minute, Robinson, that's not in an ideal state. We want their actions to align with what they're saying. Katie said, engaging and cultivating a culture of continuous improvement. Dare to ask, why do we do this way? Gina said, supporting continuous improvement and lean training opportunities. Ken offered, leaders care about operational employees. They care about their welfare and their well-being at work. They care about giving them meaningful work and the training and tools to do that work successfully. And Jennifer offered, they model the behavior. Nicholas offers, leaders want results, but they're not ready to do the proper planning. Okay, Nicholas is also probably talking about an as-is state, not an ideal state, right? So leaders want results, but they may not be ready to do the proper planning. He's listening to what you said that you see often, but yes. Anyway, that's from the folks, Tracy.
Yes. So in my experience, I have seen a couple of struggles. One of them is leaders are not really sure what they're supposed to be doing on a regular daily basis. It's sort of ad hoc, like, oh, remember to do this every once in a while. Remember to do this every once in a while. And after a while, they just get busy. It gets deprioritized. So that's an issue. The other piece of it is knowing really what to do and meeting people where they are. So if you read the book, Building a Lean Culture by David Mann, he talks about leader standard work, and leader standard work is a piece of paper that you walk around with, and you work this piece of paper basically. And some people might say, oh, really? So, it's finding something. You got to start somewhere. Right? You got to start somewhere. If you want to move, we're all on this journey. What is a good way to get leaders to start doing these behaviors without overwhelming them? Because you guys have probably run into a situation, and I'd love to hear it in the chat window. Have you had a situation where you said, okay, leaders, this is what we're going to do. And they sort of pushed back hard, like, what? I have all this other stuff I have to do. How am I supposed to fit all of this stuff in it too? No, by the way, the book is called Building a Lean Culture by David Mann, M-A-N-N. A lot of the stuff I'm going to be talking about today is going to be referencing some of the things that he talks about. But so that's the challenge I find we run into is, how do we meet leaders where they are? How do we create a plan to get some progress towards that ideal state that includes new leader behaviors? Ultimately, we want them to get going on new behaviors. We want to be clear about the expectation, but how do we really do that? How do we really figure it out? Because we need buy-in, we need acceptance, and sometimes we need a more incremental approach. So I'm going to share a way that an organization I work with took an incremental approach to leader routines and implementing a lean management system, and they were pretty successful. And one of the things that they used was a Kamishibai board or a task board. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Either way, no matter what it is, you're going to have to establish some level of leader routine, creating a routine, because if there is no process improvement happening in the organization, that means there's nothing leaders really are doing systematically to promote it. So if we want culture to change, that means leader routines need to change. So we're going to talk about task boards. I'm going to introduce those. And the first thing, before I can explain what a task board is I want to talk about what a T card is, because T cards are part of task boards. So let me cover that first, and then we're going to cover task boards. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so what is a T card? A T card looks like a T. That's why they call it that. It's a double-sided card that's green on one side and red on the other. And now the color of each side of the card is different, but usually the information listed on the card is on both sides of the card. So the idea behind this is the cards are meant to be flipped. So the T cards sit on there's a like a a structure you could buy for these T cards, and it sits right there on the structure. And then you flip the cards is the idea. The cards are meant to be flipped from red to green easily when tasks are completed. And so the T card is displayed red until the task is completed. Then it's supposed to be flipped green. So now you don't have to have T cards in particular. I've seen lots of people use these task cards without using the actual T card, but you can actually buy these. But mostly it's these cards that people use to make these task boards. So I'm going to show you an example. So several of these cards together make a task board, a set of multiple T cards or tasks for managing selected tasks. So this example shown is a task board for some daily management routines. The top row in green is all the days of the week. And for each day of the week, there's a column of task cards. And at the beginning of the week, all of the task cards ideally are flipped to the red. And as the week progresses, the tasks get completed and the cards are flipped to green, indicating that the task is completed. So like any tool, you have to understand what the tool is and how it's used best. Then you can think about how it will apply in your situation. So based on looking at this board, what day is it? Ideally, what day would it be right now? Just by looking at these cards. Anybody want to take a guess? You can type it in the chat window. All right. Good. So many of you got it right. Some of you didn't. That's okay. So if everything is red, that means these tasks haven't been done. So the only tasks that are green are Mondays, and there's actually one task left on Mondays. So that means that all the tasks have been completed except for this one task. So I'm going to guess it's Monday as well, ideally. Now, if today's Wednesday, something is not right. So that tells us two things. Either somebody's not flipping the cards or they're not doing the task. Either way, it needs to be corrected. But I think what's interesting about this is you can manage this at a glance. That's the understanding is it's visual. And if you're a leader and you want all of the leaders that report to you to do these tasks, you can look and in 2 seconds, you know if they're being done and how far along they've been doing. How far along they are with doing these tasks. So that's really important. It's very helpful to know at a glance, and that can really make it easy to see if people are doing these things. And so you can have this is a daily management board. You can have tasks for every day of the week, but you can also have a board for weekly or monthly tasks as well. So this might be, and again, you have to figure out what's best for you. You might have something you're doing you're doing it once a week or you're doing it once a month. And then there's daily tasks. So this is another variant of the task board. It's combining all of these things. And you can have a task board for one owner. You can have a task board for a team. And again, so I'm going to share something. Sometimes when we implemented this, we were talking about this idea with some of the leadership team we had. One of the initial responses, well, why do I need this? I already have a to-do list. I already use a calendar to monitor when I have to do things. And so, yes, and you know what? I got way more than 3 things a day to do. So it's not going to fit on this board, right? So sometimes that's how people react. And the idea is not to transition away from a calendar or away from a to-do list. If those are things you do, that's great. What I have found is these are great for making things more visual, especially if they're new things. And so these could be tasks that you're trying to create, new behaviors you're trying to develop that you've agreed upon. And so not every single thing you have to do needs to be on a task board. You have to really identify what it's good for. And for this particular application, all of the leaders had it for the task that they agreed to, and then they used the board to manage that. So that's an example of a variation of the board. Let's see, do I have anything that has questions, Elizabeth? Gemma says, this would be great mural. You know what? I do have a copy of one in mural just so you guys can see. I have not hired Gemma to do that because she's a mural expert. but it can definitely be done in mural. And I'm gonna show you just a little tiny perspective of how that might look.
Tracy,
So here's, yes.
one of the questions from Nicholas is, are the tasks sequentially arranged?
So it depends. You can decide if that's important or not. Maybe it's just a set of tasks that you feel like need to get done on a regular basis and the order isn't important. Or you could put it in a certain order. Sometimes people number them, right? They say, this is the first thing you should do. So it really depends on what you think is important. Some people say, no, if I get it done today, doesn't matter the order, that's okay.
Okay. Another question from Giselle is, can this system be enabled electronically?
Yes, it can. I'm going to show you that in just a moment, how that could be done. But before I do that, I want to show you an example of, this is a monthly task board. So I think what's interesting about this is they've gone away from just the task cards by themselves. They actually put it on a calendar, weekly and monthly. So now there's a specific date that they've assigned to do a certain thing. And this has worked really great for getting people used to the idea that there is some leader behaviors and leader routines that you're going to be working on. So this is a monthly task card or task board. The cards are, again, like I said, placed on the calendar. It could be a huddle meeting. It could be a Gemba walk. It could be a coaching session that you've decided to display. And what I really love about this too is it holds leaders accountable. You're showing this to people that you're going to be doing coaching with. You're showing this to people that maybe you're doing a process Gemba walk. You're showing this to your peers can see it. Your boss can see it. So there's a lot of accountability. And you know what? Okay, they may forget every once in a while, but let's be honest. Leaders are mostly honest. They're not going to just turn the cards when nobody's looking. Right? And if you're checking these regularly for visibility, it helps a lot. So these relay instant communication about what has to be done, and it's an easy way for a leader to monitor those tasks. And again, I really like it too, because what ended up happening when we started putting them out like this on the board is people wanted to go to some of the huddles. They say, oh, what time is your huddle on Monday, on week 3? I'd love to come because I kind of want to observe how you do it. So sharing this isn't just about monitoring, it's about promoting learning together. I like to say, learning stuff is hard sometimes. And you know what? Let's fail as fast as possible together. Right? Let's get through this painful part a little easier by relying on each other and learning from each other's mistakes. So just embrace the whole thing. And, the faster you can fail, the faster you're going to learn and the more comfortable that you're going to get. So I think that is a really important part. So a lot of the leaders had this as a monthly, and it said, this is when I'm going to do my leader routines. And these are the days of the month. And these are the times of the month. So again, another test. What week is it? By looking at this calendar, what week is it? What week of the month is it? Anybody want to guess? Thank you, Jacqueline. She's a fast learner here. It's the 4th week of the month because there's no red tasks, hopefully, that are happening. So what happens if you do get a red task? So, again, that's the reflection part is why did I miss this? Is it because I'm not comfortable? Is it because I was emergency? Is it because I'm not sure what to do? Is it because I just ran out of time? Well, what got in the way? So when you have red misses, because it's going to happen, when you have misses, how are you analyzing and reassessing to make sure that you can still do it? Okay, I know I see a lot of comments about mural. Gemma, I'm sure you've got a lot of business for creating it. So here's what it might look like virtually. And Gemma and anyone else who uses mural, I'm sure can even come up with even better ways to do this. But basically, you can make these cards virtual. So you can't technically flip the card unless I haven't found a feature yet that does that. But ultimately, you can download these images on both sides, red and green. And maybe you don't flip the card, but you can replace the red card with the green card. Images are easy. So you create the cards and then you can take pictures of them and upload them and put them into an app like Mural or Miro or Lucid Spark. And if you're a director or a manager, you can create an entire board for your leadership team. And you can have a huddle around leader routines. And you can have everybody check the board together. So this is just one board. You might have, all of your direct reports calendars on here, and they've got a board too. So ultimately, that is an example of things that you could do. So do we have any additional questions? I'm seeing all kinds of comments, but I'm not necessarily capturing all at once.
Yeah. So let's see. There were some around, can you use Microsoft Teams for this? And Shalom offered you could use an extension on Teams like Planner. And then Tiffany said, how can you measure these hits and misses? The visual is more of a snapshot.
Yes. So that's a great question. And this is probably something that needs to be entered into the management system of misses. So when we have misses, this is like you said, a snapshot, but you could also have a log of misses. And then you review that with your director or manager and say, okay, here's why I'm missing these. Here's what's happening. So there is some reflection that does need to happen. And there might be something else that you're doing to make sure that you're capturing the reflection. Okay, well, here's my monthly board. So how many of these did I miss or not? Sometimes people would actually move the card. They would have a section next to the calendar and they would say, oh, this was a miss. I missed this. Or they would note it. This is the date I missed it. And this was what the task was. And then they would talk about why. So there's lots of different ways. And again, you have to figure out what's going to work best for you.
Here's an idea from Gemma, of course, in terms of mural. She was suggesting in order to sort of recreate the T card, that you just put the red one on top of the green one and delete the red when you're done.
Okay, that's good. That would be a great one too.
Simple, because Joy's pointing out it has to be easy, right? And that makes it easy.
It has to be easy. And if we can make it easier to use, the better. All right, really great ideas. And again, you can still use the visual management virtually if you have a huddle with your leadership team and you review the boards as an example. Okay, good. So I have a question for you. We've got a poll coming up. So now that you know what task boards are or Kamishibai boards, how many of you actually have used these boards before? So we have a poll. Yes, you've used them and you love them. Yes, but we could do a better job. No, we haven't used them. And no, we used them for a while, didn't stick. So any comments there? And if those aren't any responses you could type one in the chat window. Jacqueline says she would love to use it. Okay, don't forget to use the poll.
She did, Tracy, just so you know. Jacqueline used the poll. She didn't just put it in the chat. She knows the rules.
Yes, good. All right. And then what have you seen, Elizabeth? What have you seen people in terms of use of task boards? Are you seeing people use them or not so much yet?
I see people use them, but their own feeling is that they could do a better job, that they're not using them as best they could. So I see that a lot.
Yeah.
Not enough of what they're doing is on there, or probably a little bit of your last point, which is maybe they're not sticking. Maybe not everyone's using them.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like Tiffany's comment. The why of misses should be captured to ensure these roadblocks are removed, because that's really part of it. If people get busy and there's no learning from why that happened, and first of all, it's a priority thing. Some of it is really just a timing thing, right? So a lot of people say, I don't have time. To me, that means they don't see value in it yet. But if they really are seeing value and now there's roadblocks, how do we identify those? All right. So what's the poll say?
So you've got basically the majority, no, not yet. So you've got a lot of folks on here, almost half, that would like to use task boards. Next biggest group is, we could do a better job, the group that I see. And then 21%, we love them. It's the 80-20 rule. 20% are like, yes, we've got this thing. And then 8% use them for a while, didn't stick.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So some of them, very little people have said they use them for a while, did stick. I'd love to hear from you guys to say, what do you think happened? Was it people didn't like it? It wasn't followed through, those kinds of things, or was it confusing? What have you? There is a question I saw in the chat window, how much detail needs to be in the task? I'm going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about what's on the cards in particular. And so we're going to get to that. I want to make sure Jackie didn't think I was ignoring her. Okay, so thank you for the poll. So ultimately, we've kind of talked about what the boards are, and I think we've hit kind of the why behind these two, but let's just iterate what the why is. So these are just some of the basic benefits for using the task boards. I'm going to tell you that some of the benefits you don't necessarily see right away. So in one organization I was working with, all of the managers reporting to the director had a task board visible in their area, very similar to the calendar. And they decided what are the leader routines we want to establish. And so as usual, as you guys have probably heard and seen, there's a lot of variation in leadership support, right? Some are really gung-ho, like they can't wait to print their cards and start using them and flipping them. And, that's that tactile feeling like done, right? You get to actually flip the card and you get that dopamine hit. And then there's others who are really hoping it just will go away. And some leaders, they just wait, right? They don't want to do it. They're like, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to see if this is just a flavor of the month and if it's going to go away before I have to expend any energy on it. Or they want to see someone else be successful first before they try it. And you know what? That's actually a very natural change management response. They say, well, I'm not against it yet, but I'm going to see if this actually works before I expend my own energy. So I want to know that it works here first. So that is a very typical and common thing that leaders do. They've got so much on their plate. They want to make sure it's actually going to work. So I had one leader who was not really embracing it yet. And everybody else was. And he finally said to me after a few months, well, I really can't not do this. It's so obvious that everyone else is using the board. I mean, I can't hide from it any longer because it was so visible. I'm like, okay, well, whatever works. I mean, so you're going to do it now then? So ultimately, he did feel the pressure. And it started to feel different, right? So people were embracing it. At first, there's a few people, it's a little slow, and then you get some of that momentum, and now people feel like they have to also participate in it. It's pretty obvious that it's taking hold. So that's what I really liked about these boards too. It's easy to see people who aren't doing it, and that doesn't feel good. So guess what? They get on board often, or they quit. So, whatever. Okay. So you're probably wondering, so let's talk a little bit first about, what kinds of tasks go on this board specifically to drive better leader behavior. So that's an important thing too. I think Deming said, it's not enough to do your best. You have to know what to do, then do your best. And that really comes into play with developing a lean management system. So let's talk a little bit about some of these kinds of leader routines. So again, before you implement any task boards for leaders, you have to decide what kinds of routines and behaviors you want to build. So here are some of the very common leader routines that are in line with a lean management system. We're not going to have time to explain all of these routines in this webinar. You're going to have to attend our leadership course at UC San Diego in order to learn about all of these. But one of them is the leader standard work form or a record or document, right? So this is actually one of the most highly leveraged tools. David Mann says this is the highest leverage thing you can do, but this is a hard thing to do. It's really a tool that helps leaders assess what they're doing every day and assess where they're spending their time. It's like a piece of paper and you fill it out. A lot of times people will print it with their calendar and they'll walk around with it. And it really helps leaders to align where they're spending their time, where they're actually spending their time, and where they should be spending their time. And, again, culture change is hard. Leaders need to change. If there's no process improvement culture, there's going to be definite changes into what leaders are doing daily. So this is really kind of forcing leaders to get used to the idea that transformational change requires them to act and behave differently every day. And so that could be a challenge, but it is definitely a tool or a routine. So then we have daily management huddles. So this is also, it's a daily meeting with teams for open lines of communication, for talking openly about problems, making processes visible. What are we doing? How did we do yesterday? What are we doing today? Anything like that. So those are also something that happens typically daily, not everywhere, but sometimes they happen weekly, but often they're promoted daily, obviously, if they're daily management huddles. We also have leader task boards. This is what we're talking about now. So these might be, you're using this board as a way to help you with some of these leader routines. And that, again, it can be used alongside with leader standard work. I've had people start the leader task boards first and then move to looking at their stuff every day as a warm up, let's just say. And so you can use these task boards standalone. There's also process performance boards. So these are things that people can create to make the process more visible. What is the process? That happens a lot in non-manufacturing transactional environments. You can't see the process. So one of the first things you have to do is you have to make that process visible first, and then the problem's visible too. So both of those are sometimes a challenge, and process performance boards help do that. So that might be something that you end up using. That means you can't just make it and then walk away. You have to use it as part of managing the process. And then there's leader Gemba walks or process walks. So these are different than rapid improvement event process walks. Leader process walks typically are shorter. They show respect for people. It helps you understand and monitor process adherence, but it also helps you look at visual controls, identify process improvement opportunities, those kinds of things. Those happen regularly. For supervisory levels, they're happening sometimes daily, and the higher you go in the organization, there's less frequency around those, but that's a routine. And, you could have a card, a task card for this routine, and you schedule it on your task board. And then finally, there are A3 use in coaching. So, are you coaching your people? What are you using to coach your people? So strengthening employees' problem-solving muscles. Are you dedicating time to that? Because it's really nice to say, yeah, we're using A3s. And, it's funny, it's not really funny, but it's interesting. Sometimes I've gone to organizations go, yeah, we don't really use A3s. We've tried to use them. We didn't really use them. I go, well, were leaders asking for them? No. Okay. Well, that's probably why we're not using them, right? Because leaders dictate what people pay attention to. And if you are not asking for your A3, bring your A3 during your coaching session, ain't going to happen. So this could be a routine that you end up creating. It could be, or I know there's a lot of people that do kata. Maybe it's improvement kata and coaching kata that you're starting to insert into a routine, which means you're spending time learning it, applying it, and you're putting time on your calendar. So again, these are not all the leader routines that people typically implement, but they're very common routines for transforming culture. And again, you can have different kinds of routines. But these are not just random things. These are not just ideas. These are specific to building a culture of continuous improvement. Okay. So ultimately, David Mann talks in his book about building a culture. He talks about 3 elements of a lean management system, and all 3 of these elements must be present in order to be most effective. So I think sometimes people go, oh, I thought I only needed 1 of these or 2 of these. You need all 3, and you need the fuel. And so he uses the analogy of a car, and I think many of you might be familiar with this, is the engine is leader standard work. It's got the greatest leverage on maintaining the health of a management system. And when it's followed, the lean management system typically can operate pretty effectively. The transmission is its visual controls, translating every process into expected versus actual performance, recorded regularly and frequently by those closest to the work. So visual controls are also, they help leaders spot when things need attention. They help workers to know when they've had misses. The steering wheel is the daily accountability process, also known as daily management. So these are typically in the form of tiered huddles. And if you need to do a sharp turn for improvement. And then finally, all of this is fueled by leader discipline. So it's the fuel that powers the engine, makes the entire lean management system go. Without the discipline, the car can't go. Those don't sound so hard, do they? But we all know that 94% of lean initiatives fail because the lean management system isn't incorporated. And the other thing is there's little coasting in lean management. So many of you are involved probably in transforming organizations and have some experience with these elements. So I have a poll for you, another poll. We're going to do another poll. And what have you found is the most difficult to implement? So is it visual controls? Is it the daily management huddles? Is it leader standard work and routines? Are you not sure because you've never done any of these? Or you had no idea any of this stuff was needed? All right, so Elizabeth, what have you seen?
I think that a lot of people stumble with leader standard work and routines. Just that, like you say, it's the engine, and it sometimes feels like too much, even though that's the driver, but I think some people sort of look at it and go, oh, I don't know if I could handle all that, instead of thinking, how do I handle all that so that the car goes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then while we're waiting, I see Nicholas's response. Do you think leaders might shy off this as extra documentation or work? Is ROI on this based on scale of different tasks from a team? So, I think what's interesting is sometimes is the approach. So some people, the document we're going to talk about, I'm going to briefly explain that because there's some confusion around that. The document, leader standard work, seems like a lot of work, and the board seems like less work to leaders is what I have found. But I'm sure other people have seen different responses. Culture's not cookie cutter. And so you have to kind of find a path that works, right? That people are going to want to do, whatever that might look like. Okay, so what's the poll look like?
So 63% are saying number 3, leader standard work and routines are the most difficult. So similar to what I've seen. And then it kind of, everything else is kind of equal. Daily management huddles at 15%, visual controls at 10%. I'm not sure, because my organization hasn't implemented any of these yet, at 10%. And then there's a 5% saying, what the heck? I didn't even know we're supposed to do this stuff.
Yes, I agree. That's what I've seen as well, is visual controls. People seem to embrace the daily management huddles. As long as they have good guidance, people seem to pick that up too. Sometimes people aren't doing the tiered connection. They're doing huddles, but they're not necessarily tiered up the hierarchy. But the biggest challenge I see is leader standard work and routines too. And I think the question we have to answer first is, how do we really be clear about what it is that we want leaders to do? Because I see a lot of confusion out there in lots of organizations, even for people that really want to do the right thing, they're not sure what to do. And so how do we create more clarity around what it is we're asking them to do first? And so, implementing all of these things, like I gave you 6 examples of what could be done. And implementing all of them can be very overwhelming. And so you have to think about that too. What's the phased implementation that you want to do to make sure people aren't going to be overwhelmed and just shut down?
Yeah, I think you've got 2 comments here from Katie and Guy. Katie said the problem may be in not seeing or understanding that these behaviors are related to one another. And I think that's kind of what you're just saying now, Tracy, with clarity, getting that clarity. And Guy offered, many have difficulty understanding the total concept and picture, lack of true leadership experience. They may have a leadership title and misconception of what being a leader means.
Absolutely. And so this is when we start talking about the old culture and the old management styles. And old doesn't necessarily mean bad, but lean management is different. It is different. You're paying attention to different things. And just like process improvement, if we're not staying on top of it, the old habits come back. They come back. And so we have to have a lot of clarity around why I'm doing this and what it's for. And I think Katie and Guy really raised really good points. Is it's not always clear. Oh, I have to be a lean manager. That means I have to have huddles. Why? What does that mean? They don't understand why. And it might not even, it feels uncomfortable, right? It feels awkward because this is a new way to manage and they're not comfortable with it yet. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind too. And it's really thinking about these new behaviors, getting commitment that new behaviors have to happen if we want to create a lean culture. And well, what do these behaviors look like? And so that is really a really important piece of, okay, getting that commitment. So I'm going to share a little bit about how this one organization was able to do that. But first, a lot of people are confused about what leader standard work is. Leader standard work is really actually a specific record. You actually use it to document what you're supposed to be doing every day. And you look at it and you assess it and you say, did I actually do those things or did I miss those things? And that is a big change in how you're managing your day for people sometimes. And so, and then there's tasks that you're doing. When you have your leader standard work in your day, you might have a Gemba walk on there. You might have a huddle meeting in there. So these are, the tasks the routines I was talking about earlier, that could be a part of what you do during your standard work. But a lot of people, especially in healthcare, define leader standard work as a document that you're using to change your behavior. It's one of the hardest parts, integrating a new way of managing, and it guides leaders into these responsibilities and does create some accountability. And it really helps, leader standard work really helps leaders fill their time with things that matter versus filling their time with things that don't. And so that's typically, how much time are you spending firefighting? Should you be doing that? How do we not do that? And that's a hard thing to do, especially if you like it as a leader. Okay, let's see. So really quickly, just to kind of finish this piece up. So again, it's a record. It could be a plan for leaders' work and a way to work that plan. And then you identify what's not working, what you missed. You typically will use it daily. But again, a lot of people use these boards instead to get people going on like 6 things. And so that's kind of how it worked before. Okay. So a lot of people have used these task cards or these task boards. They've selected, we're going to focus on 6 leader routines. We want our leaders to be really good at visual controls, leader process walks, tier boards and huddles, and A3 use and coaching. 6 things. And we're going to have cards for these. We're going to put these on these task boards or these Kamishibai boards so people can really manage these. So this is actually a rollout. This was done in King County, and they decided as an entire leadership team. So that's one of the ways you can get buy-in, is you let them help you decide what your guys are going to do. So a lot of the top leaders in this organization not only decided, yeah, we're going to do these leader routines, but they also decided on how they were going to do them. And they also decided on the rollout, like what makes sense in terms of our ability to learn these new behaviors and drive them. So this came from them all deciding as a leadership team. So I'm going to get to some of these questions in just a moment, but I want to show you kind of what they did. So what they did originally was they said for April and May, we're going to focus on creating these boards, these tier boards and visual controls for processes. So they had these 6 as a goal, these 6 leader behaviors, but they said for April and May, we're going to focus on huddle boards and visual controls. And they did activities around creating the board with their teams and then making processes more visible and showing visual key outputs. And then they said, here's what we're really hoping. They laid out kind of the targets, like here's basic, like you got it done as a leader. Here's where we want you to be. And if you can get to these things, you rock. So they were creating a sort of a basic is a minimum. We really want everybody to get to the minimum. And then leaders sometimes drive their own. And then they decided, okay, do you want to be at the target? Do you want to be at the you rock phase? So that was really helpful for people to say, what's the expectation? Okay, so we have a couple questions, I think. Adopting new behaviors requires leaders to abandon old behaviors. How do you get leaders to identify and commit to giving up on some of their current activities? Yeah, that's a great one. And that's part of the leader standard work. They have to wrestle with it personally and collectively. So I think that's what's really nice about having these Kamishibai boards for each of the leaders, because when people do struggle, so they all see that we've all agreed to these, and then they see people struggling, and they also see people succeeding. And so I think it helps leaders move collectively together. But let's face it, some leaders are going to be better at this than others, and some leaders are going to have more challenges than others. You know, we always talk about don't create a hero culture. You don't want to be the hero for your people, because then they feel like they need to be saved all the time. Feels good for you, doesn't feel good for other people or for the people that report to you. And if somebody is very comfortable in that heroic role, this is going to be harder for them. They want to firefight because it makes them feel good. So sometimes we have some leaders that need a little more help with that transition. So I don't know if that helps or not, but that's what we have to do as coaches too, is, you know, when they realize that other people are their peers are meeting these and they're actually being able to transition their leader routine, it does help from a peer perspective. Like, why am I struggling with this so much? What is it about me and why can't I do it? And sometimes they'll go and talk to them. So you're creating an environment for the leaders to be able to rely on each other too, to grow and learn. It is a good kind of peer pressure. Thank you, Jackie. So this is what they decided. So they did the training for the leaders in April and May, and then they helped coach them to grow their boards. They involved their teams. They wanted to make sure that leaders weren't just creating the boards and then nobody was involved, because that is also not a great way to get buy-in. And then they did the same thing the next 2 months. They said, okay, now that you've got a board, we can have a huddle meeting. Right? So they said, okay, we're going to do huddle meetings and leader process walks. We're going to start training you guys on doing the meetings and the huddle walks. Let's get them on the task boards and let's schedule them in and let's just try it. So it was really good that they were collectively deciding to do this as a team, because they could grow together. And then again, they created those targets. Again, here's where we really, at a bare minimum, this is what you have to be doing as a leader. Here's the target. And if you can do these things, you rock. And guess what? Some leaders hit it. Some leaders hit the you rock part. And they also decided to do that for A3s. So they had like a 6-month ramping up of the 6 leader routines. And they said, you know, by the following year, by the last quarter of the year, this should be something we're doing regularly. These are the different routines that we're doing. And again, they had coaches that were available as well. So I think Tiffany, it's a great comment. She says, how do you handle the competitiveness with the task boards? It may stimulate others and others may not necessarily take it in the right spirit. And I think that is also part of acceptance, right? So some leaders, they just don't want to do it at all. So they're going to complain no matter what. And I always ask them, well, what would work better for you? If this doesn't work, what would work better for you? Is it, you know, and what's the reasoning behind this? Why won't it work for you? And so I really, you know, you become a coach and a listener, and it's not that you're off the hook. It's okay, find a way that works for you then. We think this might work for a lot of people. And if you really have reasons why this isn't going to work, let's talk about that. So that's, you know, part of it is, you know, just like with problem solving, is we have to make sure the process does work for people. And I think that's why it's not cookie cutter. Some of the stuff's not cookie cutter. Okay, I only have a few more minutes. So here's the other thing is, you're embracing these task boards, these Kamishibai boards, you're doing lean management. Well, guess what? An executive or a director at a high level also should be monitoring the lean management system in general. Are people actually doing these things? Are the leaders using the boards? Are they doing the huddle meetings? Are they doing the process walks? So you can use this for monitoring leader standard work too. So that might be what the executive's doing. They may have their own board and they're actually monitoring some of the other leaders. They're attending some of the meetings, just checking in, those kinds of things. So that's also an important thing that sometimes we forget to do, because if people aren't enforcing it, like we know, new behaviors are hard. If someone isn't enforcing it, it's just going to go back to the old way of doing it. So who's actually reinforcing the lean management system? Who isn't responsible for the health of the lean management system? That is a great way to use one of these boards as well. Okay, and the last thing is, this is just an example of what the card looks like. So, we want this to be a card. If people want to take it and use it for their meeting, they can. This is an example of a monitoring card for Huddles. So this might be something an executive takes the card, he goes to visit a Huddle meeting. It's got the questions right on there. How do I know this is a good Huddle meeting? I don't know, right? They're trying to learn too. So it's got the questions that they're reading it and they're assessing the tier meeting or the Huddle meeting that they're attending. So I think that's, I would say keep it on there as detailed as possible. And as people learn it, maybe they don't need to bring the card anymore, but why not have it be a tool for them to learn? Have the questions right on there. What are the things, I've seen Huddle meeting cards that has the agenda right on it. And then they said, okay, I'm going to put the agenda on the actual board now, so I don't need to bring the card with me anymore. So I would say, make them about, what are you trying to learn from this? So I think that's a really important part. And so this is an example of the Huddle cards. This is they called them roundings or process walks. They stole that from healthcare. So, a leader might say, are they occurring on a regular basis? What are the visual controls doing? Is it showing the work being done? Is this is it working? Are we adhering to the process? So these are some of the things that a leader might be using as a monitoring card. So you can have all kinds of task boards. And I think really the question, because now that you know what task boards are and how they work, you have to really figure out if it's going to work for your organization or an organization that you're helping. And I think if you're in the organization, really thinking about how you might want to use these cards as an individual leader can really be helpful too. And the first thing you need to do is you need to start with a call to action. Start assessing where you're spending your time. Are you spending the time where you need to be? What kinds of leader behaviors are you using and doing right now to promote continuous improvement? Is it any of the actions that were listed earlier in terms of the six very common leader behaviors that we're using? So it's definitely a change. I think gearing people up and working with leaders, just like we do in problem solving, right? You don't want to do process improvement to people. You don't want to do the lean management system to leaders. They need to be involved in just figuring out what's going to work for them, really laying out, this is what a lean operation looks like. And here's some of the things that leaders do. Which ones are we going to do? When are we going to do it? How are we going to do it? Get them involved, because we already know it works for problem solvers, right? When you get problem solvers involved, they respond well. When you get leaders involved in how this is going to be implemented, it works really well. So that is your call to action. Here's what we've covered. I can't believe we're out of time already. And hopefully you found this valuable. I hope so. If you have any questions, we're going to see if you have any, just put them in the chat window for me. And while we're waiting for questions, I believe Elizabeth is going to cover a couple of things about some stuff that's coming up.
Well, in 2 weeks, we've got a visit from Kata Master Tracy Defoe, which is quite exciting. I'm going to put her link to this webinar here, which is just a bringing together of this Toyota Kata, this daily improvement practice, and bringing that into a lean practice. There's some learning and some unlearning involved in this. And Tracy is just a masterful teacher. So I'm looking forward to this myself, and I encourage you guys all to come. And the next thing we've got here is, this is coming. It's our July episode is with Katie Anderson, a good friend and someone we went to Japan with. And we talk about her year of having written this book, launched it. It's been 1 year since she launched Learning to Lead and Leading to Learn. And we just talk about, what's to come, what she's done with it, and some reflections on, what it was like to learn in Japan. She's going to start up the Japan study trip. So you can check out our podcast here on the website. This one hasn't launched yet, but it will be coming up. So check that out.
Awesome.
And
Okay.
Tracy, for you, you've got apparently some folks found this worthwhile, which is nice.
Yes. That's always good.
It is always good. And I don't know if it's answerable right now, but Giselle was asking, how do we encourage people not to view the standard of work as prescriptive?
Right. I always like to say structure with freedom, right? So we've talked about this in lots of ways. Like, for example, I don't recommend saying it has to look a certain way. Everybody has to follow it. Have a huddle board. That's the direction. You have freedom to decide what's important with your team. So that is structure with freedom. And that's an important part of it. You can provide a prescription if people want to learn, like to say, okay, here's the very specific steps. If you're learning, I think that can be very helpful for people. But when they need to figure out their own way of doing things, they're more bought in and it works really well. So you have to find that balance of what are you going to tell people how to do something and what are you going to let them figure out on their own? And some of that is also available in this, in the lean management system, like for example, Gemba walks or leader standard work. There's no formal template. So you need to figure it out. So have leader standard work, figure out what works for you. So I think having that direction and then a little bit of guidance, and some people like a lot of freedom. Some people just say, look, I'm on board. Just tell me what to do and how to do it. So it's finding that balance. And sometimes you have to customize the support. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Tracy. Helped me. I always think I know it all, but I don't. And it's great to listen to you. And thank you all for participating, offering your thoughts, your questions. Makes the experience much richer overall. And we'll see you in 2 weeks, hopefully at Tracy Defoe's, and we'll email everybody with links and the template that Tracy mentioned. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.